Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayamudhirayet shrinvatam svakata krishna punya shravana kirtana Ridyantastoya badrani vidunoti suritsatam nashta prayeshva badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavat yutama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. Welcome, dear devotees. Today we have the wonderful opportunity to continue with the glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam, written lovingly and devotedly by His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So continuing on with the third canto, chapter 5, and today we're reading text 4. That's correct. Tatsadur Varya Disha Vartma Samnaha Tatsadur Varya Disha Vartma Samnaha Samradito Bhagavanyena Pumsam Samradito Bhagavanyena Pumsam Ridistito Yachati Bhakti Pute Ridhistito Yachati Bhakti Pute Jnanam Satatvati Gamam Puranam Jnanam Satatvati Gamam Puranam Tatsaru Varya Disha Vartma Shamnaha Samradito Bhagavanyena Pumsam Ridhishtito Yachati Bhakti Pute Jnanam Satatvati Gamam Puranam Tatsaru Varya Disha Vartma Shamnaha Samradito Bhagavanyena Pumsam Ridhishtito Yachati Bhakti Pute Jnanam Satatvati Gamam Puranam. Prabhus, please. Tatsaru Varya Disha Vartma Samnaha Samradito Bhagavanyena Pumsam Ridhishtito Yachati Bhakti Pute Jnanam Satatvati Gamam Puranam Tatsaru Varya Disha Vartma Shamnaha Samradito Bhagavanyena Pumsam Ridhishtito Yachati Bhakti Pute Jnanam Satatvati Gamam Puranam Tatsaru Varya Disha Vartma Shamnaha Samradito Bhagavanyena Pumsam Aridishtitoya jati bhakti pute. Jnanam satatva digamam puranam. Tat sardu varya dishavartma shamnaha. Samradito bhagavanyena pumsam. Ridistitoya jati bhakti pute. Jnanam satatva digamam puranam. Word by word. Tat, therefore. Sadhu varya, O great one amongst the saints. Adisha, please instruct. Vartma, the path. Sham, auspicious. Naha, for us. Samraditaha, being perfectly served. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Yena, by which. Pumsam, of the living entity. Ridishtitaha, residing in the heart. Yachati, awards. Bhakti pute, unto the unalloyed devotee. Jnanam, knowledge. Sa, that. Tattva, truth. Adhigamam, by which one learns. Puranam, authorized, old. Translation and wonderful divine purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, O great sage, please give me instruction on the transcendental devotional service of the Lord, so that He who is situated in the heart of everyone can be pleased to impart from within knowledge of the absolute truth in terms of the ancient Vedic principles delivered only to those who are purified by the process of devotional service. Purport. As already explained in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the absolute truth is realized in 3 different phases, although they are one and the same, in terms of the knower's capacity to understand. The most capable transcendentalist is the pure devotee of the Lord, who is without any tinge of fruitive actions or philosophical speculation. By devotional service only does one's heart become completely purified from all material coverings like karma, jnana, and yoga. Only in such a purified stage does the Lord, who is seated in everyone's heart with the individual soul, give instruction so that the devotee can reach the ultimate destination of going back home, back to Godhead. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 10.10. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam. Only when the Lord is satisfied with the devotional service of the devotee does He impart knowledge, as He did for Arjuna and Uddhava. The jnanis, yogis and karmis cannot expect this direct cooperation of the Lord. They are not able to satisfy the Lord by transcendental loving service, nor do they believe in such service to the Lord. The bhakti process, as performed under the regulative principles of Vaidhi Bhakti, or devotional service following the prescribed rules and regulations, is defined by the revealed scriptures and confirmed by great acharyas. This practice can help the neophyte devotee to rise to the stage of Raga Bhakti, in which the Lord responds from within as the Chaitya Guru, or the spiritual master as superconsciousness. All transcendentalists, other than devotees, make no distinction between the individual soul and the supersoul, because they miscalculate the superconsciousness and the individual consciousness to be one and the same. Such miscalculation by the non-devotees makes them unfit to receive any direction from within, and therefore they are bereft of the direct cooperation of the Lord. After many, many births, when such a non-dualist comes to sense that the Lord is worshipable and that the devotee is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord, then only can he surrender unto the Lord, Vasudeva. Pure devotional service begins from that point. The process of understanding the absolute truth adopted by the misguided non-dualist is very difficult, whereas the devotee's way of understanding the absolute truth comes directly from the Lord, who is pleased by devotional service. On behalf of many neophyte devotees, Vidura, at the very first instance, inquired from Maitreya about the path of devotional service, by which the Lord, who is seated within the heart, can be pleased. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sva Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, good morning, dear devotees. Very delighted to speak in this wonderful August assembly of very wonderful devotees, as well as their divine Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, Sri Sri Gauranitai, the Pancha Tattva, Sri Nrsingadev, and wonderful Prahlad Maharaj, His Grace Pankajangri Prabhu, and the whole Guru Parampara. So please give us blessings so that we can say the right things at the right time in the right spirit to properly glorify this wonderful verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So today there's very beautiful instructions or understandings in here about pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So every morning we sing Yasya Prasadat Bhagavat Prasado, Yasya Prasadat Nagati Kutopi. So pleasing the spiritual master is the same as pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in the same sense, displeasing the spiritual master is also displeasing to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in undertaking my study on what pleases the spiritual master, I came across a wonderful lecture by Her Grace Devi Shakti Mataji, and she's in Vrindavan Krishna Balaram Mandir. They're speaking on the 10th canto at this point in time. And there's a beautiful pastime where Srila Prabhupada went into the room of these very famous artists. And then so Prabhupada was trying to give them an explanation of Mother Yashoda looking into Krishna's mouth. And so then he was explaining about there's so many rivers and there's so many mountains and there's so many streams and the whole universe is in Krishna's mouth. And then so the artists had never ever heard of Krishna book previously This was in 1970, and then so it was after 1970 that Prabhupada was determined to get the summary of the 10th canto out there so that the devotees could hear Krishna's pastimes and thus become attracted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Daivi Shakti recounts the situation where they were sitting in Srila Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada explained the whole universal creation inside Krishna's mouth, and then Prabhupada said, "Now you paint it." And so then it's explained that they fell over. They were like hearing the wonderful whole creation in Krishna's mouth, and they fell over, even though they were very talented artists. And so then it took the head painter about a month to try and schematically understand, how am I going to put a tiny little boy and a mother, and then all of a sudden a whole universal creation in the mouth. So in his desperation, he wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada saying, I have no idea how to commence this wonderful work. How am I possibly going to put the whole universe in Krishna's mouth? And then so Prabhupada drew a beautiful picture. So he drew a stick picture of Mother Yashoda, a stick picture of little baby Krishna, and then he drew a speech bubble. So this painting, which was wonderfully commissioned by Srila Prabhupada, organized by Srila Prabhupada, is now in Montreal, Canada. So when you walk into Montreal, Canada ISKCON Temple, you can see this beautiful painting, exactly as Prabhupada suggested, with the speech bubble and then the whole universal creation in Krishna's mouth. So this is an instance of pleasing the spiritual master. So by that very action, by following the spiritual master's instructions, how to paint Mother Yashoda and baby Krishna, Srila Prabhupada was pleased, and then this also pleased Krishna. So then there's another, moving on to the understanding of the art. So then one other artist was commissioned by Srila Prabhupada to draw a painting of Nrsingadev in his Ugra form of bifurcating the chest of Hiranyakashipu. And so originally the painters drew the painting of the bifurcation of the chest of Hiranyakashipu with the chisel-like nails of Nrsingadev, and then sent it to Prabhupada for analysis. And then Prabhupada's it was literally one sentence response was, "More blood." And then so they do more blood and then sent it back to Prabhupada, and then again Prabhupada, in this time in capital letters, "More blood." And then finally, the third time, Prabhupada sent a letter back saying this is the right amount of blood. So they finally pleased the spiritual master after numerous attempts. So in here, it also explains the beautiful path of Vaidhi Bhakti. So the spiritual master has given us rules and regulations that we have to undertake in order to please him. So one of those instructions, there's a beautiful handwritten letter that Srila Prabhupada puts. Actually, Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj is the GBC of Vrindavan, and so in the Krishna Balaram Mandir, the welcome center, every Kartik he places that handwritten letter from Srila Prabhupada in there saying anyone who stays in these rooms has to attend Mangalarti every day. If they don't attend, then there's no prasadam, there's no mercy. So this is the essence of Vaidhi Bhakti. We wake up early in the morning, look at the deities, chant loudly the Gurvastakam prayers lovingly compiled by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And in there, there's a glorification of the Gurvastakam prayers, whereby it says anyone who loudly chants this in the Brahma Muhurta hours of the morning is guaranteed to attain devotional service to Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. Thus, emphasizing the importance of Vaidhi Bhakti, or the following of the rules and the regulations. Then as an individual advances, they get to this Raga Bhakti stage, or Raga Nuga Sadhana, which essentially, I remember Urmala Mataji, the chair of the Shastric Advisory Council, was saying that the Raga Nuga Bhaktas, they even attend the Mangalarti in the morning program as well. The change that occurs between Vaidhi Bhakti and Raga Nuga Sadhana is essentially an internal change. So you might see in any temple around the world that there's people practicing Raganuga Sadhana. Very rarely, but it's an internal change rather than an external change. So going into this wonderful purport, it explains also that there is a process of purification. So we know that Krishna is very pure, and he requires his devotees to also be very pure. So then in the research of purity, I was looking through, and Prabhupada explains that the items from the cow are very pure. So what might look like from a material point of view, the cow dung might seem to be, according to the mundane material speculators, to be muchi or dirty. But according to the Vedic conception, even the bone of the conch shells we blow is officially bone, and so that's considered clean, as well as the cow dung from the mother cow. And understanding, it's interesting because someone asked Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, what is your favorite animal? And Prabhupada said, the horse. And Prabhupada turned around and then they said, what about the cow? And then Prabhupada very sternly said, she is not an animal, she is my mother. So it's very important to understand the cow as the mother rather than the being the animal. So essentially, in this purport, it also helps us to understand that there is karma yoga, or fruitive activities. And then there's also jnana yoga, or mental speculation, and dhyana yoga, which is empiricism. So then if you go to the teachings of Rupa Goswami from his wonderful book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we can understand that devotional service or bhakti is free from any tinge of karma, jnana, and dhyana yoga. So bhakti yoga is in and of itself separate from all the other forms of yoga. So it's very important as devotees that we're practicing bhakti yoga, of which there's 9 limbs of yoga or bhakti yoga. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. So we hear, we chant, and then we finally get realizations or seeing Vishnu, remembering Vishnu, Pada Sevanam, worshipping the lotus feet of Krishna, Archanam is devotional service to the deity, Vandanam, offering prayers, Sakyam, making friends with Krishna, it's listed as a devotional service, Dasyam, becoming a servant of Krishna, and finally Atmanivedanam, or giving up everything for Krishna. So, and then we can see that through this process of purification, then Krishna will reveal himself to us. And so this is a gradual progression that we become pure, and then the Chaitya Guru within our hearts can speak to us and can guide us in our spiritual realizations, can guide us in how we should conduct our affairs in the material world, everything. But it's essential that that's, as Ramai Swami was here explaining, that that's a very advanced stage of realization, that the Chaitya Guru will speak to you, and usually it's a situation where we have to take shelter of our Shiksha Gurus, our Diksha Gurus, in order to help us to understand that we are going on the right path towards Eke Ha Kurunandana, or exclusive single-pointed focus on Krishna as dear as our life and soul. So essentially, one may ask, how do we please the spiritual master? So, and then Srila Prabhupada was exemplary in his own life as an acharya, because his spiritual master, His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada, gave him the instruction at Radhakund, because they only met 3 times. First time Srila Prabhupada met Bhaktisiddhanta, Prabhupada was as Abhay Charan Aravinda, was in quite a challenging mood. And this exemplifies the fact that you're allowed to challenge the spiritual master up until initiation, but after then there's no challenging at all. So Prabhupada met Bhaktisiddhanta, and then he was very impressed, but despite he had this arguing or challenging mood. Then when Prabhupada left outside his first darshan of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada turned to his friend and he said, I will take shelter of this spiritual master. So already there was the idea that he would surrender and take shelter of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then in the 3rd meeting that Srila Prabhupada had with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was at Radhakund. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta often had a 60,000 strong sannyasis in his Gaudiya Math, and he had this emphasis on going to Vrindavan for Kartik, and particularly at Radhakund. So Srila Prabhupada approached Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and said, and then Bhaktisiddhanta immediately revealed his mind to him, and he said, if you ever get money, print books. And previously Srila Prabhupada was very much in conversation with Bhaktisiddhanta by by writing lots of articles. So, and a lot of what Prabhupada wrote was indeed produced in the Harmonist, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's most preeminent literature that he was distributing. So much so that anything received by Srila Prabhupada to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta famously said, anything that he writes, print it. Such was the quality of Srila Prabhupada's words. And so I found something interesting from 1958, where Srila Prabhupada wrote a poem. And so obviously we know by the time 1958, Srila Prabhupada had left his household affairs and he was practicing Vanaprastha in Vrindavan, because it's very beautifully explained that Prabhupada personally said, every man is given an opportunity at the end of their householder life to understand things and understand the separation from family life in a procession towards the sannyas ashram. And so then this is when he was in Vanaprastha. And then it's interesting because I was listening to a room conversation, and then the devotees were asking Srila Prabhupada, how did you take sannyas? And then Srila Prabhupada said, I was forced to take sannyas by my sannyas guru. And then he literally grabbed Prabhupada and said, you take sannyas. So whilst in the early stages of Krishna consciousness, we understand, Radhanath Swami famously says, love is taking responsibility without force. There can also be force, especially, and when someone has the danda, then it's just automatic surrender. So Prabhupada writes this beautiful poem, I am sitting alone in Vrindavan Dham. In this mood, I am getting many realizations. I have my wife, sons, daughters, grandsons, everything, but I have no money, so they are a fruitless glory. Krishna has shown me the naked form of material nature. By his strength, it has all become tasteless to me today. Yasya ham anugrinami harishye tad dhanam shanai. I gradually take away all the wealth of those upon whom I am merciful. How was I able to understand this mercy of the all-merciful? So it's really interesting that Srila Prabhupada was given an astrological chart when he was born, and it was said that he would be one of the richest men in the whole of India. So then, as he approached Vanaprastha, all his material affairs were failing. So his once successful pharmaceutical affairs was now entering into a stage of decline. And so this is the example of, I gradually take away all the wealth of those upon whom I am merciful. So, and then Prabhupada also writes that Hari is the name of Krishna, which takes away all the pious reactions in the world. And then Krishna is the name of Krishna that takes away all the impious reactions in the world. So if we have pious and impious reactions, that can still keep us caught up in the material world. And often when someone's bestowed the mercy of having all their wealth taken away, it's to be seen as a great mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So rather than the conception of Karmakanda Brahmanas, I come to the deity and hopefully get a big house and a big material rewards, in this sense actually Krishna takes away the wealth of those upon whom he is merciful. And then there's a beautiful, last night we were reading in the Krishna book about the gopis of Vrindavan where Krishna steals their clothes. And in the introduction, Prabhupada explains that they were performing the Katyayani Vrat, or the worship of Durga. And then so Prabhupada says that Narottam Das Thakur reminds us that we should never under any circumstances worship the demigods. And in actual fact there's a strict prohibition from Narottam Das Thakur whereby he says anyone who worships the demigods will not be able to attain pure devotional service to Radha and Krishna and Vrindavan. So then one has this idea, then how come we are given the instruction by Srila Prabhupada to follow the example of the gopis of Vrindavan, and then they are worshipping Durga and Shiva to get a good husband. So the important point that Srila Prabhupada makes is the husband they want to get is Krishna. So whenever we go to the demigods, it's important to have that intelligence not to go for material benedictions, but for spiritual benedictions. Because we know that Lord Shiva is the protector of the Dham, and he's also Vaishnava Shiva Shambho, or the greatest Vaishnava, so therefore he can bestow prema bhakti. So it's that important realization to be able to discriminate between the appropriate method of associating with the demigods, seeing them as Vaishnavas, and then not asking for material opulences or boons. So Prabhupada further continues, everyone has abandoned me, seeing me as penniless. Wife, relatives, friends, brothers, everyone. This is a misery, but it gives me a laugh. I sit alone and laugh. In this Maya samsara, whom do I really love? Where have all my loving fathers and mother gone to now? And where are all my elders, who were my own folk? Who will give me news of them? Tell me who? All that is left of this family life is a list of names. So it's really important in further studying this particular text, I was reminded of the song of the Avanti Brahmana. And so in that study I came across Radhanath Swami explaining that in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, it's compulsory for the Tridandi Sannyasi to recite the song of the Avanti Brahmana every day. And that instruction has been since time immemorial. So anyone who takes sannyas in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya must recite the song of the Avanti Brahmana. And when we come to the understanding of the Avanti Brahmana, it's explained that Avanti, the place he was living in, was very high in terms of dharma. So a lot of varnashram dharma, understanding that he was a brahmana, so therefore he would live by collecting charity and therefore also distributing charity. But in the case of the Avanti Brahmana, he grew puffed up and proudful as a result of his collections. He became very wealthy, and then as a result of that he became very greedy, and then he didn't distribute his wealth as is recommended by the brahmanas, or the rules or the injunctions prescribed for the brahmanas. So as a result of his greed, then he became very angry and malicious towards his servants, his subordinates and his families. So then eventually, as similar to what Srila Prabhupada has happened to Prabhupada, very important to understand that Srila Prabhupada was a very devoted father, he was a very devoted husband, and he didn't have that same sense of being greedy as a result of having so much material wealth. It's a different situation for the Avanti Brahmana. And so the Avanti Brahmana became very rude, angry towards his subordinates, and then so eventually Krishna bestowed his mercy upon this Avanti Brahmana and took everything away. So those people who he spoke to very rudely now didn't want anything to do with him at all. He lost all his money. And Prabhupada gives us an understanding that like a paramour with a prostitute, once the paramour has lost all his money, then the prostitute is no longer in the service of the paramour. Similarly, when a student goes to school, after he's finished his study, he abandons the teacher. And Prabhupada also tells us that in this modern age, it's common where despite the fact that parents have looked after children their entire life, sacrificed so much, fed them so much, and then the child gets to adulthood and then abandons the parents. So it's very much, and so with this transition from Vanaprastha into Sannyas, everything was taken away from the Avanti Brahmana. So then he decided, well, okay, I'll take up the danda and the begging bowl, and then see whatever is by the will of providence I will receive. So then the Avanti Brahmana had to cope with, despite the fact that he'd surrendered, and Krishna was already very advanced. Krishna in the Chaitya Guru was speaking to him in the heart, but still he had to tolerate all those repercussions from how he spent his, or misspent his grihastha life. And so people would pass foul wind in front of him, they would urinate on his food, whenever he got food, they would call him a thief, and then so many terrible things occurred. And so for the Avanti Brahmana, he took a maun vrat, or in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya there is a maun vrat, which means a vow of silence, but it doesn't literally mean you don't vibrate anything, it's just vibrating Krishna's names, Krishna's pastimes. Everything about Krishna, according to the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, satisfies the maun vrat conditions, whereas the Mayavadis see maun vrat as silence. So when they take a silence vrat, we know that if you're not vibrating anything, not hearing anything, then very quickly you fall down into philanthropy or sense gratification or those sort of things. It's very interesting to understand this song of the Avanti Brahmana, and indeed how the sannyasis, they recite that every single day, and it's all for Krishna's pleasure. So Krishna likes to hear the verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he also likes to hear the devotees glorify him. He also likes to see the devotees cooperating with one another. And there's a very beautiful pastime with Srila Prabhupada towards the end of his manifest pastimes in this material world, was lying in his bed in Krishna Balaram Mandir, and then he said to the devotees, "Your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate with each other." So this is a way that we can please our spiritual father, Srila Prabhupada, and therefore please the the Supreme Personality of Godhead as well, by how we cooperate with each other. So then this poem has many verses, and it shows Srila Prabhupada's wonderful understanding of Krishna consciousness, and in a time when he was trying to move from Grihastha life into the more advanced spiritual renounced orders. And so he writes, "How many plans they have to remain well. By time and time again, nature destroys them. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi. That is the Supreme Lord's Maya. Try to understand exactly the meaning of their feeling well. No one is well in the whole world, but still they are saying, in this way, Maya cheats the conditioned soul. But ignoring that, he is being cheated. He remains absorbed in Maya, and although Maya kicks him, he will not give up his mistaken conception." So it's really interesting when you understand we have to surrender to something. So we can surrender to Krishna's internal energy, his Ladini Shakti, or his external energy, which is Maya, because we're so infinitesimally small that we have to take shelter of something. So people in this way, they take shelter of Maya. And so this kicking is understood by Srila Prabhupada when he explains, like the ass, he works so hard for his material master the whole day, and then he's fed by the master, and at night time he tries to enjoy with another female ass, and the female ass just kicks him in the face. So this is Maya, but the internal potency of Krishna, which is all attractive, all beautiful, we can surrender there, and therefore these repercussions from the material energy won't be there. So it's just a matter of understanding that surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sharanagati, is the whole purpose of our being in this material entrapment. Believing ourselves to be infinitesimally part and parcels of Krishna, understanding that Jivera Svarupa Haya Krishnera Nitidas, and then so not only are we Krishna's servant, because if we go to the Adi Purana, Krishna personally says to Arjuna, those who say they are my servant are not truly my devotee. Those who say they are the servant of my servant, that is my devotee. So it's very beautiful to understand, and then to make it even more, that was Krishna in his original form talking to Arjuna, but then when Lord Chaitanya manifests, he famously says, servant of a servant of a servant. So, Gopi Bharta Rasa Kamalayor Dasa Dasa Anudasa. So becoming a servant of a servant of a servant. So therefore it requires humility to get to that level of being a servant of a servant of a servant. Because as we understand from the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we all wanted to be the Lord of the universe. That independence that was bestowed upon us led to us, because qualitatively we're the same as Krishna, quantitatively very different. So that individuality that Krishna has in full, we also have a partial, very qualitatively individuality as well, but quantitatively very small. So that qualitative individuality is represented by our desires. So we desire to be the Lord of the material universe, therefore we fell down into this material nature, and so now it's our path going back home, back to Godhead. And the process is to hear and chant the holy names, please the spiritual master, and therefore please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's really, the further we go into Krishna's Bhagavad Gita and his teachings to Arjuna, it explains that one who understands the transcendental nature of my birth and activities never takes birth in the material nature and returns to my supreme abode. So it's very beautiful. We can be free from Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, or birth, sickness, old age and death, by following the process of Krishna consciousness, by pleasing the spiritual master, and therefore returning to Krishna's supreme abode. So Krishna is so magnificent and so magnanimous that every day of Lord Brahma, which is 4.32 billion years, he personally descends on this world. So, and not only does he descend himself, but he also descends with his entourage. And he also brings Vrindavan, because there's a very beautiful pastime where Krishna wants Srimati Radharani to come with him to this material world. And Srimati Radharani says, I'll only come if there's three things: Govardhan Hill, Jamuna, and Brajraj, the dust of Vrindavan. So Srimati Radharani, Krishna is so magnanimous, he doesn't leave his eternal consort in Goloka Vrindavan. He also brings Srimati Radharani down. All very important to understand that they're never affected by the modes of material nature in the same way as the jivas. Krishna Tattva, Vishnu Tattva, Radha Tattva, Shiva Tattva is very different from Jiva Tattva. So we cannot understand Krishna save and except for the mercy of Krishna. So it personally requires the mercy of Krishna. It's explained every Kartik we sing the beautiful prayers of Damodar Ashtakam, and in there it explains there's always two fingers short when Mother Yashoda is trying to bind Krishna around his belly. So those two fingers are the devotee's endeavor and also Krishna's mercy. So there's no other way to understand Krishna than Krishna's mercy. And it's really interesting because already after Srila Prabhupada was awarded the title of Bhaktivedanta, and he's sitting in the Radha Damodar Mandir, there's a very beautiful room where Srila Prabhupada had his quarters in the Radha Damodar Mandir, and we can see, Bhakti Chaitanya Swami tells a beautiful story about how there's a stone up in the roof, and Prabhupada explained that was his little a Vrindavan safe. So he just remove a stone from the roof and pull it out, and then he put his passport and his money up there and then put it away. So, and then it was only recently that the authorities of the Radha Damodar temple have actually closed Srila Prabhupada's room for him to sleep at night. Whereas previously in the 80s, they had a situation where anyone could go and sleep in Prabhupada's room overnight or stay there, but now there's definite hours. At a certain time the door is closed and it's left exclusively for Srila Prabhupada. So, going back to the point about we cannot understand Krishna except for the mercy of Krishna. So as Kadamba Kanana Maharaj came here and he was giving class, he said, we should all be mercy hunters, hunting for mercy. Where's the mercy? Is the mercy on Harinam, the mercy on book distribution, the mercy is there for cooking for Krishna, the mercy is there for cooking for the devotees, the mercy, there's so much mercy because Krishna has descended, given us this process, so therefore we have to take those opportunities in order to further our own Krishna consciousness. And then in terms of mercy, Vishnu Jan Swami asked a very interesting question of Srila Prabhupada. He said to Prabhupada, why are you giving me so much mercy? And then Srila Prabhupada's response was, you are taking it. So we can take Srila Prabhupada's mercy, and much in the line of Vishnu Jan Swami, we should take the mercy of Srila Prabhupada when it's on offer. And not from the point where we push other people away to get to the arti tray, or we rush forward to the Mangalati sweets and eat them all ourselves, but more in a situation of cooperation, listening to our authorities and behaving in the appropriate manner. So in this material world we work very hard for money, we study hard, we look nice to attract other people. So the most all-attractive person is Krishna. He has this attractiveness in full. It never deteriorates. So all these other forms, karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, cannot help us in our practice of Krishna consciousness. But through these processes, we cannot actually reach Krishna through any one of those other processes. So we have to practice Bhakti Yoga, which is the sublime, authorized system given by our Guru Parampara, and therefore we can finally come to Krishna. So, interestingly enough, Prabhupada explains Daivi Hyesha Gunamayi. So that it's very important to understand that Maya is Krishna's. Maya is a servant of Krishna. Therefore she knows the minds of the conditioned souls very well. She knows what will entrap them in the material world. She knows how to evoke their feelings of lust, anger, greed, madness, illusion and envy. So then the devotees and Krishna's entourage give us the means for alleviation of these symptoms of Maya. So in Raghunath Das Goswami's Mana Shiksha, he explains, while here on the path of devotion I've been attacked by the hideous gang of lust, anger, greed, madness, illusion and envy, who have bound me around the neck with the rope of my own deeds. I am being killed, so cry out piteously like this to the devotees of the destroyer of Baka. They can save you from these enemies. So essentially, we have to be in the mood of crying for Krishna. We have to be in the mood of, like a little baby calf that has lost her mother, we have to be in that mood of crying for Krishna. And Madhava Prabhu very nicely in his kirtans reminds us often of crying for Krishna. Please help me, please give me your shelter. I need shelter from the material existence, and actually the only way is to take shelter of Krishna. And of course we're moving into the Krishna book reading of Krishna lifting up Govardhan Hill, and so therefore sheltering all of his devotees. And then it's interesting that if you analyze the right foot of Krishna's lotus foot, there is a mountain there representing, or an umbrella representing the shelter of Krishna. So understanding Lord Chaitanya and pleasing Lord Chaitanya was a prayer that Srila Prabhupada was saying in the Radha Damodar Mandir. Every day he was singing, please Rupa Goswami, let me understand Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So even despite the fact that he had a Bhaktivedanta title, he had a sannyas, and a very qualified in terms of birth, in the purport, or in the preface or the acknowledgement in the Krishna book, there's a little statement that Srila Prabhupada writes, my father Gaur Mohan Dey was a pure devotee, and he was very influential in allowing me to worship the Radha Krishna deities from a young age, and he gave me a Jagannath Ratha Yatra cart. Such was his determination for me to understand and please Krishna. And there's a beautiful, we can see, Bhakti Charu Swami has given us the beautiful Prabhupada Leela Mrita, or the Leela, or there's a video presentation of Srila Prabhupada as a young boy, obviously characterized by an actor, playing that part where where Prabhupada is pulling the little Jagannath Ratha Yatra cart. So, when we understand how attractive Krishna is, we can have a fragment of that understanding by when we see the children. When the children, they're struggling to speak, or they fall over, or they run around the temple. Anyone who comes here at the Krishna book in the evening can see numerous children running around. They draw on the whiteboard. Sometimes the child pulls their sister's hair and all these sort of things. So it's attractive. And where does that attractiveness come from? It comes from Krishna. Because Bal Gopal is that all-attractive form. And so then when we go to the pastimes of Krishna, he was so attractive. You know, he could steal butter, even though he's the most opulent king in the whole of creation. He can create an entire world just by looking sidely at his sidelong glance, can create a whole world. And then he steals the butter. He breaks the butter pots of the gopis. And then when they report back to Mother Yashoda, your son is breaking all our pots, he's stealing all our butter. They're telling, and then they're falling in love with Krishna by just talking to, and then they realize we can't chastise him at all. How could we chastise him? He's so attractive, he's so beautiful. So These pastimes that are here in this Srimad Bhagavatam are to help us to please Krishna by hearing them. And we don't just hear them once. We don't think, oh, I've already heard the prayers of Lord Brahma. I've already heard how the gopis' pots are broken. I've already heard how Krishna kills Denakasura. No, we listen in a mood of Nitya Nava Nava Yamana. It's eternally more and more eager to hear the pastimes of the Lord. And there's a very beautiful statement that Devi Shakti was saying about the Krishna Balaram Mandir. She was explaining about how, we're not the only people who have gone through a lockdown. So with this coronavirus, we've all had to experience this lockdown. But there was an original lockdown as well. And so Devi Shakti explains that after Krishna had killed Shakatasura, Putana and Trinavarta, Nanda Maharaj approached all the cowherd men and all the cowherd women and said, we're going to have to lock down Krishna and Balaram so they can't go outside. So that is a very beautiful way of understanding that, that even that lockdown was present in Krishna. And of course there's the wonderful, or perhaps the demoniac way of when Vasudeva and Devaki was locked up in the dungeons of Mathura under the wicked rule of King Kamsa. But it's beautiful because we know that out of that came the most beautiful personality in the whole of creation. So, and it's also beautiful that goes down in history, how Krishna was born. So, and that shows his renunciation, that shows Krishna's humility. He may have had a situation, we might have asked, like similar to the sages of Naimisharanya were asking Sutta Goswami, how was Krishna born? And then you might have had this situation, Krishna was born on this gold chariot and this everything opulent. But no, that's Aishvarya Bhav. But Vrindavan is all about sweetness. So Krishna was born in such a sweet way. His own father was carrying him on his head across the Jamuna River. And he was born in this situation where one of the most wicked kings of the whole of creation was trying to kill him. He was determined to kill him. And so then he rose above this and he managed to live that life of sweetness in Vrindavan. And we know that Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. Krishna is always eternally present in Vrindavan. And he brings Vrindavan down for us so that we can be attracted to him. Much in this way, it's to deliver the fallen souls. So it's very interesting, the deeper we go into Krishna consciousness, the more it helps to understand us that within our heart and every other living entity is the Chaitya Guru. So, and then interestingly enough, when I was reading through Prabhupada's understanding of the Chaitya Guru, it helps us to remind that our process is not about austerities, it's not about performance of or harming the body or anything, because it explains those who undergo severe austerities and penances not recommended in the scriptures, performing them out of pride and egoism, who are impelled by lust and attachment, who are foolish and who torture the material elements of the body as well as the super soul dwelling within, are to be known as demons. So these advanced austerities or these advanced penances are not recommended because we know that Krishna is in our heart. So therefore, why would we naturally want to hurt Krishna? Why would we want to put him through such terrible things? So it's important that we treat our bodies like a temple. We eat foods that Krishna likes, taking the Mahaprasadam, the foods in the mode of goodness, which are juicy, fatty, wholesome and pleasing to the heart. So we don't undertake those austerities which are not recommended. But we do follow in the footsteps of the gopis. We can follow the Katiyani Vrat after the month of Kartik, where they eat just very simple prasadam of mung dal and rice with no masalas, no turmeric, just very simple prasadam. And it's interesting because Indra Prabhu used to always follow that after the end of Kartik, because what happens after Kartik, it's a big festival and we've offered our ghee lamps so lovingly, we've sung Damodarastakam prayers. Generally it's a time when devotees do enhance in heightened levels of Krishna consciousness. And then after it's over, the appropriate way of ending a Kartik Vrat properly is the Havishyana, or just the mung dal and rice, very simple prasadam for a whole month. And that helps us to alleviate of our symptoms of a heightened level of devotional service, a heightened level of chanting, bringing us back down into a more suitable way of interacting with the world. So we're very fortunate that we have Srila Prabhupada. We're very fortunate that we have all these books. If we incarnated previously when there wasn't commentaries of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we would have tried to have studied the Vedas. We would have, because we know Keshavadrita, Meena Sharira, Jaya Jagadish Hare. So Krishna incarnates as the fish. And then Krishna also incarnates as Korma, Keshavadrita, Korma Sharira, Jaya Jayadeva Hari. And it's really interesting, through my study of this Dasavatar Stotram, I came to the understanding of what is the diameter of the shell on the tortoise, on the Korma. So it's actually quite big. So let me see it here. It was explained as the shell of the tortoise was, hang on, I can't find it. Sorry, let me just find it. Here we go. 800,000 miles is the shell of the tortoise, which is 1,287,475 kilometers from the shell of Korma. Just to give us some perspective, the whole world that we live in is 40,000 kilometers. So it's, the shell of Korma was so great, so big. And then of course we know that from the creator of Krishna, nothing is impossible. Krishna has inconceivable potencies. And the last thing I wanted to mention, this time of year we've just had Nrsingadev Appearance Day, which coincides with the disappearance day of Hiranyakashipu. And then there's a beautiful prayer that Lord Chaitanya says, Lord Nrsingadev is like a mother lion to anyone who tries to harm her cub. She is like death personified, but for her cub she is so sweet and loving. So that's how we understand Nrsingadev in his Ugra form, where he's bifurcating the chest of Hiranyakashipu and garlanding himself with the intestines and entrails of Hiranyakashipu. Then we also have the situation where he's very much pacified by Prahlad Maharaj. So Nrsingadev never shows his Ugra form or his devastating, vicious form to Prahlad Maharaj, which very much corresponds to the statement, Yayatamam prapadyante tamstatava bhajamayaham, mama vatmanu vartante manosaha partha sarvasaha. As all who surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Prita. So coming to this understanding of Krishna, beautiful, it's all rewards. Krishna has the capacity to destroy the demons very easily, as is understood with the Lord Boar, the Varaha incarnation, just uses his hoof to touch Hiranyaksha and then automatically Hiranyaksha is destroyed. And then so many beautiful other avatars or incarnations of Krishna, as Lord Ramachandra, it was him who personally shot the arrow into Ravana, therefore causing his destruction. So when we have this Krishna consciousness, when we become advanced, Krishna will talk to us in our hearts. Prior to that, we should very much take the association of Shiksha Gurus, Diksha Gurus, senior Vaishnavas, in order to understand Krishna consciousness, in order to understand what are we to do. But it's also very important to understand that we may have already had a lot of instructions already, and then we're just trying to satisfy those instructions as well. So, in conclusion, I'd just like to finish with another beautiful verse from this poem of Srila Prabhupada. And it says, in name only they were great, sober and unaffected men. They were all unpeaceful, desiring liberation, sense gratification or mystic powers. All had uncontrolled senses. The uncontrolled senses don't answer to the potency of yoga. How many yogis and munis there were, and always the senses remained independent. Without service of the master of their senses, there can be no sense control. They all return to material activities after a short time of peace. By the process of yoga, no one ever attains sense control. This is explained